Jy luister na RSG Geldsaake met Moneyweb potgoeie elke weeksdag om 7 namiddag. Vir die belangrikste sakenuus, skakel in op RSG Geldsaake.
FirstRand, wat onder meer FNB in sy stal het vandag ook sy finansiële resultate vir die 6 maande tot einde Desember gewys. FirstRand is Suid-Afrika se grootste geldlener as mens na die markwaarde daarvan kyk. Die groep het aangekondig dat sy wins met 6% groei toegeskryf aan veral rente-inkomste. Daar is ook aangekondig dat slegte lenings aan die toeneem is, wat dalk wys op toenemende druk op die bank se kliënte. FirstRand het 'n tussentydse dividend van R2 per aandeel verklaar, dis ook 6% hoër as verlede jaar. Ek het vroeër met Alan Pullinger, die FirstRand groep se bestuurshoof, gesels. Good afternoon, Alan. Welcome to the show.
Last you spoke to us, you predicted a difficult 12 months ahead for the South African economy with high interest rates putting pressure on consumers here. Do these results show that?
Absolutely, we think it does. I suppose we're pleased from a FirstRand perspective. We've seen our advances growth or loans, if you like, come back nicely. So growing 11% in the 6 months and compared to the comparative, and also deposits growing. And so nice net interest income, if you like. And then if you look at our cost of credit, which is really what you're talking about, how we're doing in terms of non-performing loans, is there payment strain? At a group level, it's printed really well. So just to give you sort of a sense, there's a range that we would expect it to fall within, 80 to 110 basis points, and it's only at 83 basis points. So we've just tipped our toes, if you like, into the bottom end of the range. But what that hides, Tinus, is your point, is that when we look at retail lending, so consumer lending, particularly unsecured credit cards, we're already starting to see it on some home loans, pockets in vehicle finance. We can see payment strain starting to manifest. And when I talk about payment strain, it's where a customer misses 1 month, then they miss 2 months. So we track the stuff, and that payment strain is starting to show itself in that retail space, which is understandable. Coming back to your point, high interest rates, high inflation, consumers under pressure. There's no doubt. So, yes, our results, you look at it and say, FirstRand, we're not seeing it. But, one, it tells you where we were coming from, the level of provisioning that we had going into the cycle. But we are certainly seeing it. It's not as if we will avoid it.
That number you talked about, sorry to go into detail, but it's up from 74 to 83. What does that mean?
So we talk about that jump really as a normalization. So the point to appreciate is the 74, that starting point. When I tell you my range is between 80 and 110, but I tell you I'm coming from 74. 74 almost couldn't get better. I mean, it was kind of the bottom end of the cycle, i.e. very, very low non-performing loans, very, very low on credit stress. And now that we're moving into a cycle which is tough, I mean, these interest rates are high combined with inflation and then all of the structural issues that consumers have to deal with, high petrol prices, electricity issues. So the jump from 74 to 83 looks huge, but actually it's much more of a normalization because that 74 was almost too low, if you understand me.
So, Alan, a big part of the income that you talked about in these financial results are from interest rates. It's also described by some as interest rates that are higher than expected due to inflation that is higher than expected. Does the income come from the top end of your clients?
No, it's everywhere. I mean, if you look at where the loan growth has come from, we talk about loans growing 11%. Okay, but that's not 11% right across the board. So if you look at retail loans, so into, FNB retail, into consumer lending, so things like home loans, car loans, unsecured loans, credit cards, etc., that's coming in at around 7%. And then lending into FNB commercial. So these are your smaller little businesses, SMEs, up to sort of mid-corporates. That grew at 10%. And then at the large end, which is kind of really where RMB plays, into the larger corporates, and they also do cross-border lending into the region, those books grew 14%. So you can see at the bigger end, 14%, FNB commercial 10%, but then retail lending, a lot more muted, down at 7%.
So what does the next 12 months look like? Are interest rates coming down this year? Can we move before the rest of the world by cutting our interest rates?
Yeah, it's a good point you make. I don't think, as a small open economy, we are dependent on foreign financing for our deficit. We can't afford to move before the big developed markets. So I guess we're all sort of Fed watching at the moment. I guess when the Fed starts cutting and the Bank of England follows, then I think it opens up a window for us to start thinking about interest rate cuts. I can't see us moving before those big central banks. So our house view assumes in the second half of this calendar year, we would see interest rate cuts. I think the point to note, though, is that the interest rate cuts are likely to be shallow. So when I say shallow, maybe it's 1.5% of interest rate cuts. I think that's all we can see. And then interest rates are going to be held sort of constant at that level. Now, that's not going to take us anywhere near where we were. Remember coming, in COVID, interest rates were way, way lower. The repo rate was 3.5. Now the repo rate is 8.25. So when I say, it gets cut, 1.5% or somewhere, maybe we get a repo rate of 7%, but 7% is still double where it used to be at sort of those depths. So I think it's important for consumers and borrowers to appreciate that, yes, there's cuts coming, but I just don't think they're going to be as deep as maybe people think.
So another difficult 6 months at least?
Yeah, Tinus. I'm going to say the next 6 months, it's hard to see where relief is going to come in the next 6 months. So let's get to September, somewhere there. And then hopefully as spring emerges, there can be some happiness that also comes from the Reserve Bank and they can start cutting interest rates. But I do think we're going to have to get through winter, I'm afraid, with these interest rates.
Thank you, Alan. Dit was Alan Pullinger, groepsbestuurshoof van FirstRand.
Jy het geluister na RSG Geldsaake met Moneyweb potgoeie elke weekdag om 7 namiddag. Vir meer Moneyweb potgoeie, besoek moneyweb.co.za of laai die toepassing af en volg Moneyweb News om dagliks op hoogte te bly.